Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I never expected him to matter. He was my ex's brother, someone I had known only in passing during family gatherings, brief introductions, and awkward conversations at parties I had attended reluctantly. His name was Nathan, tall and easygoing, with a quiet charm that made people gravitate toward him without even realizing it. After my breakup with Daniel, I had avoided him at first, feeling the awkwardness of shared history, but somehow, he became the one I confided in when the nights grew too heavy with loneliness. The first time it happened, I wasn't even aware it was happening. I had been sitting in my apartment, nursing a glass of wine that had gone warm too quickly, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the emptiness Daniel had left behind. Nathan had texted asking if I was okay, a simple message that seemed so small but felt like a lifeline. We ended up talking for hours that night about mundane things, about books and movies, about memories I hadn't shared with anyone else. There was a comfort in his presence, even through the glowing rectangle of my phone screen, that I hadn't felt in a long time. Eventually, he suggested he come by not to pry, not to push, but simply to sit with me. I was hesitant at first, the thought of being alone with Daniel's brother making me uncomfortable, but there was something in his voice that disarmed me. When he arrived, it was like stepping into another world. Nathan didn't try to fix me, didn't offer empty platitudes or judgment. He just listened, his presence steady and grounding. And somewhere between laughter and the confessions of old wounds, a bridge was quietly built between us, one that neither of us seemed prepared to name. It started with small touches. A hand brushing mine as he passed me the wine glass, a shoulder bump that lingered too long, an accidental touch that sent a shiver up my spine. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was only a side effect of being lonely and vulnerable, but the feeling grew, persistent and undeniable. There was something about the way he looked at me, not like my ex had, not like anyone else had, but as if he truly saw me with all my cracks, my doubts, my insecurities, and yet didn't flinch. Our first kiss was entirely unplanned. We had been sitting close on the couch, talking about a film we both loved, when he laughed, and his hand brushed against mine again. I didn't pull away. He didn't either. And suddenly, in the quiet of my living room, under the dim lamplight, happened a brief, hesitant kiss that opened a door I wasn't sure I should have opened. And when it was over, we both froze, aware of the weight of what had just happened. The danger of desire mixing with loyalty and history. After that night, everything changed. Our meetings became more frequent, more deliberate. Lunches turned into dinners, casual texts, into long, intimate messages exchanged late at night, confessing thoughts and feelings I hadn't dared share with anyone. The thrill of the forbiddance was intoxicating. Nathan's charm had always been understated, but now in the secret, it felt electric. Every glance, every touch, every accidental brush of hands carried a tension that made my pulse quicken. First time we were alone in a hotel room, it wasn't planned. A sudden rainstorm had trapped us far from my apartment, and Daniel was out of town. Nathan suggested we wait it out somewhere dry, somewhere private. I hesitated, aware of the line we were crossing, but the way he looked at me, soft, patient, understanding, made it hard to resist. One thing led to another, and suddenly I was pressed against him, feeling his hands on my skin, feeling the heat between us ignite. The guilt hit immediately afterward, sharp and insistent. But so did the memory of how alive I felt in his arms. Weeks turned into months, and the affair deepened, moving in secret through quiet apartments, rainy city streets, stolen afternoons. We developed a language only the two of us understood. Subtle touches, lingering looks, whispered words that carried entire confessions. Nathan seemed to know exactly how to soothe my fears while stoking my desire, balancing intimacy with restraint, in a way that left me addicted to his presence. I hated myself sometimes. Every time I returned to my apartment, every time I saw Daniel, every time I tried to maintain the charade of my ordinary life, Guilt gnawed at me like an unrelenting tide. I would lie in bed at night, replaying every moment with Nathan, feeling the heat of his hands, the weight of his gaze, the thrill of being truly understood, and simultaneously despising myself for the betrayal. The danger of discovery only intensified the passion. We were cautious, yes, but nothing could erase the electricity between us. A near encounter with a neighbor, a phone call that almost caught us in the act, a dinner party where we had to maintain careful composure. All these moments made our secret meetings feel urgent, precious, necessary. I began to crave the tension, the risk, the stolen intimacy that made the world outside our connection seem dull and gray. There were nights when we would sit together in silence, our foreheads pressed together, breathing each other in, realizing how impossible our love was, but unable to resist it. Nathan's presence reminded me of who I was before I had been numbed by routine, before my heart had learned to accept safe, predictable love. He made me feel alive, desired, seen. And every time I kissed him, every time I held him, it became impossible to forget that truth. Eventually, reality intruded. Daniel grew suspicious. His questions, his careful observations, his quiet, lingering glances began to pierce the wall I had built. I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth threatened to spill out. Nathan and I talked about it, both acknowledging the danger, both understanding the inevitability of consequences, and yet we clung to each other desperately for the connection that neither of us could find anywhere else. The day we decided to end, it was unbearably quiet. We met at a park where we had first laughed together, holding hands, leaning into each other as if we could will the world to stop. There were no angry words, no dramatic confrontation, just the bitter knowledge that some loves are too intense, too consuming, to survive in the light of reality. We kissed one last time, slow, agonizing, memorizing the feel of each other in a way that would last a lifetime. Life resumed afterward, fractured and cautious. I returned to my apartment, to the routine with Daniel, carrying a secret flame in my heart that would never fully die. Nathan remained a ghost in my life, his presence, felt in every longing glance, every memory of laughter, every echo of the love we had shared in stolen moments. Even years later, I could feel the warmth of his hands, hear the timbre of his voice, sense the way he always seemed to understand me in ways no one else ever could. Some connections, I realized, are permanent, impossible to erase, shaping you in quiet, irreversible ways. After that night, Nathan became a constant undercurrent in my life, a presence I could neither ignore nor control. Every message, every call, every fleeting touch became a thread weaving us together in ways that frightened and thrilled me. I would find myself staring at my phone during meetings, waiting for the ping that would signal him reaching out, my heart racing even when it was something trivial as simple, "How's your day?" or a comment on a passing cloud. The simplest interactions felt loaded with meaning, carrying the weight of months of unspoken desire, longing, and guilt. We began to meet more deliberately, always careful, always balancing on the knife edge between secrecy and exposure. Lunches that were business meetings became quiet confessions. Casual walks became opportunities to brush against each other, to linger in proximity while the world carried on oblivious. I learned to read his subtle cues, the way his eyes would search mine for a reaction, the barely perceptible shift of his shoulder when he wanted to be closer, the way he laughed softly at things I hadn't meant to be funny, and I, in turn, began to crave those moments, to shape my own movements to intersect with his in ways that no one else would notice. One rainy afternoon, we found ourselves trapped in a bookstore while a sudden downpour hammered the city streets outside. We wandered the aisles, pretending to browse, but our conversation was a low, intimate whisper punctuated by accidental touches that sent heat racing through me. He leaned close to read the title of a book I held, his breath brushing my ear. And I felt a thrill I could not name. That was when I realized that this connection had moved beyond desire. It had become essential. I craved him in the way one craves air or sunlight, a necessity that was as intoxicating as it was dangerous. Our clandestine meetings escalated further. Late-night dinners under assumed names, hitting corners in cafes that had long since closed. Hotel rooms booked under aliases all became stages for a story that existed only between the two of us. Each time I returned home, a ghost wandering my own apartment, guilt gnawing at me, and yet there was a part of me that could not stop, that refused to let go. Nathan reminded me of who I was before I had been tamed by routine, before I had accepted a safe but uninspiring existence. In his arms, I remembered fire, chaos, passion, the parts of myself I had thought were long gone. David began to notice subtle shifts. A lingering look I could not hide, a distracted tone in my voice, the faint scent of someone else on my clothes that I could not mask entirely. He asked questions in the gentlest ways, never accusing, never pressing too hard, but the unease in his eyes was unmistakable. I found myself shrinking under his gaze, aware that my careful charade was beginning to falter. Every interaction with Nathan became a battle between desire and fear. Every stolen moment a potential reckoning. One night, during an unexpected snowstorm that blanketed the city in white, we met at a secluded park. The snow muted the world, muffling footsteps and sound, creating a private world for just the two of us. We walked in silence for a time until he reached for my hand, threading his fingers through mine, and I felt the pulse of electricity that always came with his touch. I wanted to stay frozen in that moment forever, but I knew the world beyond the snowbank existed, a world where consequences waited, and yet neither of us pulled away. We kissed there, snowflakes melting on our skin, hearts pounding with the knowledge that each moment together was borrowed, fragile and fleeting. Weeks later, we found ourselves in a quiet apartment building late at night, the world outside asleep, and the thrill of danger made every second more vivid. His hand traced along my arm, light but deliberate, and I shivered at the contact. Our whispers filled the room, confessions spilling from us like water from a dam, things we hadn't dared say to anyone else. I've never felt like this before, he murmured, and I realized in that instant that the feeling was mutual, that our connection was no longer a secret desire, but a force that had claimed us entirely. The fear of discovery became a constant shadow. Every phone vibration, every knock on the door, every unexpected visitor brought a surge of panic. Yet the danger only heightened the intensity, transforming our meetings into intoxicating games of secrecy and restraint. I became adept at excuses, at scheduling, at hiding traces of our encounters, and Nathan matched me step for step. There was a rhythm to our affair, a dangerous harmony that kept us tethered while the world outside continued, unaware. One evening, after a long day of tension and deception, we ended up at his apartment again. The lights of the city glimmered through the window, painting our silhouettes in gold and shadow. We talked, we laughed, we lingered, and the distance between us collapsed entirely. The kiss that followed was slow, deliberate, full of months, of pent-up longing and unspoken confessions. I felt as though I could disappear into him, leaving the world behind entirely, and for a moment, I nearly did. But reality intruded the ticking clock, the world beyond the apartment, the life I could not abandon, and I pulled back reluctantly, trembling with a mixture of desire and guilt. Time passed in a blur of stolen moments, secret touches, and whispered promises. Nathan had become the mirror of my true self, reflecting back desires and fears I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. I was awake in ways I hadn't been for years, alive in ways I hadn't imagined. And yet the weight of betrayal was constant, pressing down on me, reminding me that our love existed in shadows and would remain forbidden. Eventually, the strain became palpable. David's suspicion deepened, subtle but insistent. Our affair, once a secret haven, now threatened to unravel the fabric of my life entirely. Nathan and I faced the inevitable, the realization that our connection, while undeniable, could not survive in the open without destroying everything. And so we agreed with heavy hearts to step back, to retreat into the lives we had before, leaving the bond between us alive only in memory. Our farewell was quiet and intimate. We met at the overlook where the city stretched below us in a glittering expanse of lights. The air was crisp, the night silent except for the faint hum of distant traffic. We held each other in that cold, still night, kissing with a desperation that defied reason. There were no words, no explanations, only the knowledge that this connection had changed us forever. And as we parted, I felt a hollowness in my chest, a loss that could never be filled by routine, by safety, by the life I had chosen to return to Dot in the years that followed. The memory of Nathan lingered like a shadow, a secret flame that refused to die. Every time I passed by a familiar street, every time I felt the pull of desire, every time I caught myself longing for someone who truly understood me, I remembered him. Our affair had been impossible, dangerous, and deeply forbidden, yet had revealed a side of myself I had long denied a woman alive, desiring, vulnerable, and unafraid to feel. Nathan's presence remained with me, a quiet, indelible mark, shaping my heart, my choices, and the depths of what I was capable of feeling. Even decades later, when I think of him, I can feel the brush of his hand against mine, the warmth of his gaze, the thrill of those stolen moments. He had been my ex's brother, yes, but he had also been the one who truly understood me, the one who awakened a fire I had thought extinguished, the one whose memory would remain an unshakable part of me forever. After that first accidental brush of our hands in the dim light of a quiet cafe, the world seemed to tilt. Every glance, every laugh, every casual touch carried weight, a hidden meaning that neither of us could ignore. Nathan became more than a friend or confidant. He was a storm quietly brewing in the background of my life, unpredictable yet impossible to resist. I caught myself thinking of him at the most inconvenient times, during a staff meeting, while cooking dinner, even when David casually mentioned weekend plans. My heart betrayed me in those small, intimate betrayals of thought. We began to carve out moments in the spaces that felt safe but fleeting. A coffee shop closing for the evening where we lingered over steaming mugs, speaking in half whispers. A quiet bench near a fountain where the night air was damp and sweet. The rare hours when Nathan's apartment was empty and the city outside seemed suspended in stillness. In those moments, I felt the full weight of desire and the thrill of the forbidden. Our fingers would intertwine for longer than necessary. Our knees would brush under the table, and every contact felt like a secret rebellion against the mundane. Life I have returned to each morning. The danger of discovery only intensified the longing. I became a master of small lies, explanations carefully crafted to explain away unusual absences or lingering scents. David, perceptive in ways I had long ignored, began to notice subtle changes, my distracted gaze, my restless energy, the faint, unexplainable traces of another life shadowing ours. I answered with practiced calm, never betraying the intensity of what was happening in the hidden corners of my existence. Yet, even as guilt gnawed at me, I found myself craving the tension, the dance of risk and reward, the way every encounter with Nathan left me flushed and trembling, alive in ways I had long forgotten. Winter came, and with it, the cold nights that drove us closer. One evening, snow blanketed the streets in soft white, and I found myself slipping out to meet him under the pretense of a late-night errand. The world was muted, the city quiet, and we walked together through empty streets, our hands brushing, until they finally met, interlacing as if they had always been meant to fit. Nathan's voice, low and intimate, broke the silence. "I shouldn't be here," he said, and yet his hand in mine said otherwise. I felt the fire of our connection surge, the electricity of a desire too long suppressed exploding into action. We stopped at a secluded square, the snow falling around us, and kissed with the hunger and longing that had been months in the making. The affair deepened, extending beyond these stolen moments into days where the tension between us became unbearable. I would catch myself lingering over his messages, replaying his words in my mind until they became a private soundtrack to my life. I found excuses to pass by places he might be, to linger in conversations with mutual friends, so I could glimpse him without appearing conspicuous. And Nathan, in turn, seemed to exist in the same liminal space, caught between restraint and reckless abandon, each encounter leaving us both on the edge of exhilaration and fear. There were nights when the world seemed to conspire against us, when danger lurked around corners. A close friend once noticed the intensity in our exchange glances and asked with innocent curiosity if something had changed between us. I had to laugh, a nervous, hollow sound, and shrug it off, pretending it was coincidence. And yet, inside, my pulse raced, the thought of discovery adding a sharp edge to the already intoxicating tension. Every public interaction became a balancing act, a careful choreography to maintain appearances while harboring a life that existed in shadow. One late evening, during a power outage that cloaked the city in darkness, we found ourselves trapped in his apartment building lobby. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint smell of rain-soaked coats. The moment was charged, the quiet humming of the emergency lights casting long shadows. He drew me close, our lips meeting in a kiss that spoke of months of longing, of secrets, of unspoken confessions. I felt the world shrink to just us, a fragile bubble of desire insulated from consequence. The memory of that kiss haunted me in the days that followed, a private flame that no one else could touch or extinguish. Our encounters became more elaborate, more daring. Late-night drives through deserted highways, stops at abandoned piers where the water reflected the moonlight, hotel rooms booked under careful pretense, each a temporary world carved out for our connection alone. Each encounter deepened my awareness of myself, of my capacity to feel, to crave, to risk, to exist fully. I had never felt so intensely alive, yet the cost of this life, the constant deceit, pressed down like a weight I could not escape. The inevitable confrontation with reality loomed. David's intuition sharpened, questions growing sharper, suspicions forming around my restless energy and my distracted demeanor. Nathan and I knew that we were reaching the point of no return. The thrill of secrecy had carried us this far, but it could not shield us from the consequences forever. Every glance we exchanged was tinged with urgency. Every touch a reminder that our connection, though undeniable, could not exist in the open. Finally, we met one last time at a hidden overlook on the outskirts of the city, the skyline glittering below like scattered jewels. The wind whipped around us, cold and unforgiving, and we held each other tightly, knowing this was the last time. Our kiss was desperate, lingering, full of months of unspoken desire and the pain of imminent separation. There were no words, only the silent acknowledgement that what we had shared would remain a secret, a memory, a private flame that would never fade in the aftermath. Life resumed its measured rhythm. I returned to my routines with David, carried on conversations with friends, maintained the facade of normalcy. Nathan continued his life, distant but present in the periphery, a shadow that reminded me of what had been lost and what could never be reclaimed. And yet, in the quiet moments when the city was asleep, when the air was still, when no one was watching, I felt him. I felt the warmth of his hand, the intensity of his gaze, the hunger and passion that had defined a chapter of my life that could never be erased. Even years later, I would pass by familiar streets, hear familiar phrases, or see fleeting glimpses of people who reminded me of him, and my heart would clench with the memory of stolen moments, whispered confessions, and the forbidden love that had awakened something inside me I could never deny. He had been my ex's brother, yes, but he had been the one who truly understood me, the one who reminded me of the woman I had once been and the woman I could still become. And that connection, impossible and forbidden, remained etched into my soul, a secret fire that neither time nor distance could ever fully extinguish.